Now that you've had a chance to come up with a clear standard and benchmark in which you want to teach your standard-based lesson, now it's time to try to find a way to gather some evidence of whether or not the students reached that benchmark. To do that, let's scroll down to step 1. The most important thing you need to do in any lesson plan ever is to identify what's called the action verb. And the action verb is so important because it's a type of behavior that you can actually see, and it demonstrates a type of understanding. We try not to use the word understanding in our lesson plans because we can't see inside somebody's brain. So, unless you're psychic, we have to use something coming from what we call Bloom's taxonomy. And Bloom's taxonomy represents a whole bunch of student behaviors that represents different levels of understanding in a person's brain. For example, they go from simple to complex. Knowledge, comprehension, application, analysis and synthesis, and evaluation are getting more and more complicated in thinking, and that if we use the words underneath each of those, we'll be able to measure those types of understanding. So for example, in this benchmark, what's the action verb below? Write in a variety of grade appropriate formats for a variety of purposes and audience. Write is what the person's actually doing, and so we can measure that. Take a look at examples 2 and 3 and see if you can identify the action verb below. If for some reason your benchmark does not have an action verb or a verb that's unmeasurable, for example, as we said, when it says the word understanding, use Bloom's taxonomy and find an action verb that works for that benchmark and add it in. Step 2. Now that you have identified that action verb, there are assessments that will best measure that. When we say best measure, we mean that an assessment that's going to give us the best information, the most information, because it attempts to match the behavior that the student is trying to do. So for example, if I want somebody to write, I should have an assessment that involves writing. So look at your textbook, read the pages that have to do with classroom assessment in terms of traditional and alternative, and make sure you find one of these assessments that best matches your action verb. So let me give you another brief example. If your action verb is identify, a traditional test such as multiple choice works very well. If your action verb is demonstrate or analyze, a multiple choice test no longer works very well, and now we require some more alternative assessments such as projects, exhibitions, things in which somebody has to do something. And in this way, we are matching and aligning our action verbs with the actual assessment that we need to use. Okay? So let's go ahead and go down to step 3. Once you've identified and aligned your assessment with your action verb, create a sample of it. You don't need the whole thing, but you should give enough to give a feel for, to me, that you know what you're doing. So for example, if it's a multiple choice, 5 selected response questions. If it's an essay, give me the one essay question. If the assessment is authentic, then you should give a student an example. And you have some examples here for portfolio, what it would look like. And you can go off of that. You can also take a look at the student examples to give you a better idea. Step 4. Create the scoring key you will use to measure that assessment. So you can again look at the text as your resource and also visit various websites which will help you create that key for your test. Then finally, answer the following questions below to let me know that you have a good understanding of what assessment is and how it's measured. So number 1, why did you choose the assessment? Number 2, you should give a brief explanation of whether or not your assessment is formative or summative, norm reference or criterion reference, etc. And please read this part of the text to be able to do that. Same with number 3, will students be allowed to be part of the assessment process? This doesn't mean that the students take over, but what it means is whether or not they have any control over how something is assessed, how it's assessed, and the opportunities to self-assess, because when you give somebody more control over the assessment, they have a tendency to understand it more and engage more. Read this page to give you a better idea of what it's like to involve students in assessment. After the students have taken the assessment, how will you communicate that score? Will you just give them a paperback with the score on it? Will you send information home? Will you post it up on a grading chart? And then think about what would happen if on number 5, what is the possible effect of that grade? So for example, norm reference basically means that it's compared to other students. So if a student gets an A and one gets an F, what would that mean to that student versus something that's criterion reference, which means it's based on a set of criterion? Please take the time to read this little section in the text because it will really let you know the difference between those two and the implications of your grading system on students' perception and their self-confidence. Step 6, once you have completed that in your 5 answers, fill out part, you already have section A and B done, fill out part D. Section C will be completed after we do the next one. Take a look at the 2 examples and then save a copy on your computer. Don't submit it until the entire lesson is finished because we'll be building this throughout the semester. And then move on to the next part, instruction.